Amy Lunardi, welcome to this episode of the Australian Property Podcast.
I'm looking forward to this episode, Owen.
We are answering some questions with a twist. These questions are coming from Reddit.
I was inspired by this episode. I spend a lot of time on TikTok and I'm not ashamed to say it, Owen.
Okay.
I'm a very avid TikTok watcher. I get so much learning out of it.
Yeah.
Through anything. Finance, makeup, exercise, nutrition. And there's a couple of TikToks where basically they just read out Reddit stories, funny Reddit stories. I find it really amusing.
And so you figured, why not do that on the podcast?
Yeah. And these aren't funny Reddit stories about property. These are actually questions which people have asked. There's a few property forums. There's Aus Property Chat. We've got like hundreds of thousands of people in there. I like the Aus Property one because then you can click which state it's relevant to as well.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so someone can say, I'm in Melbourne and this is a Melbourne question. Victoria, I mean.
Yep.
And it's all anonymous. So where I just went through the last couple of days of posts really and picked out some questions which I thought were really interesting so that we could answer those questions.
Yeah, cool.
As professionals rather than relying on Reddit answers. And this is the benefit and drawback of the internet.
Yes, it is. It's very noisy.
The benefit is you've got someone to ask. Maybe, Owen, you're out there trying to buy a property. You don't have anyone that can help you. But then the problem is these people don't know necessarily themselves. Sometimes there's great advice and I see answers. I'm like, yes, that's the way I would have answered it. And other times I see advice like, that is terrible advice. Take the good with the bad, Owen.
Yeah, you do. Reddit's
do you
a great
spend
place.
time on Reddit?
The first time in probably the past 5 years I went on earlier this week because there was a whole bunch of Reddit threads about Rask and about me and stuff like this. And I just wanted to go and just kind of clear the air about some things. They weren't bad. It's just that we had a financial planning client come through and they were like, saw your name on Reddit and that's why we reached out. Everyone spoke so highly of you guys. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. I'll go check it out. Then I found all the things that weren't positive and I was like, oh, geez. So I don't take that stuff personally. I don't really care too much. Like I do care that if people get things wrong, but everyone's entitled to their opinion and preferences. And so it was more just me like, here's my perspective on one big thread. There was like 58 different comments. So, so I went in there, but you know what? If I had to choose for property stuff, between Pinterest and Reddit, I spend more time on Pinterest.
Not for advice, I presume, more for like interior design.
For interior design,
renovation.
Exterior design.
Yeah.
Because you can like do like, say if I wanted like brick edging recently, I want to get some more brick edging done.
Yeah.
But what you can do with Pinterest, which is super cool if you're doing a reno, is you just find one image that you like. You can save it, add it to your watch list, or you can just like, I think you just hold your finger on it and then it will just populate other ideas that look almost exactly the same. So then you get a different variation of the same thing until you find something you want. And I was like, that is cool.
Pinterest, though, is for inspo, and then Reddit is where you go to say, hey, this is what I want to build.
Intel.
How do I do it?
Yeah.
Or ChatGPT these days.
True.
I've had a few clients come to me I say, how did you find me? And they said, I just asked ChatGPT for some reputable buyers agents in Melbourne. Yeah. But then when I did that on ChatGPT, my name didn't come up.
Yeah. That's a whole thing, isn't it? It's like customized to people's preferences as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of like now you get to see the real way the search engines operated for all those years. But we get a lot of students that way actually through ChatGPT now. So, okay, first question is in the Aus Property, what is it, thread? Is that what you call it?
Subreddit.
Subreddit. Wow. That shows my age. Okay. The title is Like to House at Open House, What's Next? They say, we are looking for our forever home and we just received pre-approval for $2 million plus stamp duty. There is a house we visited. This was the first open house that we went to. We really liked it. We checked CoreLogic estimates and it was 1.9 million low, 2.3, 2.25 high. So it's kind of like they're in the sweet spot. They're in the middle of this thing. The house is going to auction next month, but the vendor is open to considering any reasonable offer. Should we give our best offer? If we present for the house, do we come across too eager or do we wait for the auction? What's the best strategy to use for an auction then? Are buyer's agents worth it was tacked onto the end.
Oh, okay.
Let's answer that second.
We will.
But let's go $2 million house. They've just based on the question.
Okay.
They seem kind of new. The CoreLogic says it's in the range.
Let's tackle that first, Owen.
Okay.
CoreLogic First of all, having then a range of 1.9 to 2.3 is very unhelpful, isn't it?
It's pretty broad.
It's a 20% range.
Yeah, it's 400 grand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's a computer algorithm, which is taking into consideration maybe things like land size, bedrooms. And I find in a lot of cases it's really unhelpful. It's either way over, it's way under, the range is too broad. So I'd say never use a computer algorithm to determine how much that property is worth.
Yeah.
First of all, you've got to do your own comparable sales research. We can talk for a whole episode about that. And then secondly, it's around, well, this property is going to auction. They've said they're open to reasonable offers prior. What do we do? And within this Reddit thread, there were so many people saying, lowball them, start off with a really low offer just to tease them. Other people saying, go in with your best offer and say it's on the table for 3 hours and that's it. A lot of terrible advice in this thread. So in this situation, if you're wanting to buy a property prior to auction, first of all, do all of your due diligence. Don't even bother having conversations with the agent until you have figured out, is this right for you? Is there any deal breakers? Make sure you're definitely interested in moving forward.
Yep.
And, you might then do your building inspection, your contract review, et cetera. Just be ready. And the conversation you need to be having with an agent about buying a property prior to auction, because bear in mind, for an agent selling beforehand, there's an element of risk. All of a sudden, instead of having an unconditional contract at auction, there's a cooling off period. They might not necessarily want to expose their client to consider an offer, and then that buyer changes their mind, and then they've mucked up the campaign. The vendors have all of a sudden got higher expectations, et cetera. It's very challenging sometimes for an agent to sell prior. So you need to establish, first of all, will they sell prior or not? Yes or no. Secondly, at what price will they sell prior? Reasonable. This question said they'll consider reasonable offers prior. What's reasonable?
Yeah.
So I always want to get, if not a figure, very close to a small range of a figure of what would buy it prior. And if you're not getting commitment from the agent about a price, I wouldn't be doing it. Right. Unless you have a really strong reason or compelling reason you want to. For example, you want to try for that one prior because your other plan B goes to auction this weekend. You want to do everything you can to try and buy this property now. But otherwise, I'm always wanting to get a specific figure out of that agent. So
you're saying don't go in with the number. So say in this case, it's like, say, 2 million, 2.1. You're saying the first thing isn't, here's my offer. It's what would make them sell before auction.
Exactly. You want to get them to give you an idea about it, and then you can make a decision. You don't want to show your cards.
Yeah.
And you want to know that if you're taking the next steps to do this, that it's going to be productive. You're going to get an outcome here. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah.
And then the third step is to understand the process. This is super important. For example, if you buy a property prior to auction, you put an offer in, all of a sudden you might then trigger a best and highest situation where the agent says, okay, well, everyone puts in their best offer by tomorrow night. And if you're not the highest offer, you're not getting a call back. Do you want to put yourself in that situation? What if you do end up in that situation? You didn't think you thought you were going to have a backwards and forwards, but you didn't ask the question.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it sells to someone else. You may
common?
as well go to auction. Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yep. So you say, okay, first of all, yes or no. Second of all, get a ballpark price or a specific price. And then thirdly, what's the process? And then you can decide whether putting an offer in prior is right. And then how much you're going to put forward. I mean, that's going to depend on your research around comparable sales, how much you want that property. If it is going to be going backwards and forwards, you might say, okay, well, if you've got commitment from that agent, they'll put it on the market. In other words, they'll consider 2 mil prior, but you're willing to go up to 2.1. Well, you might put that 2 forward and then know that you've got that extra 100 grand if it triggers a boardroom auction or it triggers a backwards and forwards beforehand. But what if it triggers a best and highest? And in which case, are you going to put in forward 2 or 2.1 if you're not going to get a call back? You've got to, there's so much to do before you put something forward to make sure it's the right strategy.
Because you're triggering, you got to know what the next move is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so common that people don't ask. And then
I wouldn't have thought to ask, to be honest. I've never done that.
No. And then so many times I'll be speaking to buyers and they'll say, I got burnt by that agent. I got mucked around by that agent. And I'll say what happened. They'll tell me what happened. And I'll say, look, to be honest, you didn't ask the right questions. Perhaps they should have explained it to you better. But a lot of agents forget what buyers don't know. Or they just fail to take them through it step by step. And then the buyers feel like they've been burnt. Yeah. When in reality, it was just that was the process that was going to happen anyway, and the buyer didn't expect it. They missed out. Yeah,
bad experience for them. Buyer's agent, worth it?
Yes, Owen, they are worth it.
Okay. And hear from a buyer's agent. But it's fair.
Look, I think there are amazing buyer's agents out there. I know a lot of them. I think there are buyer's agents out there that are not worth it. They are either very inexperienced, they are money driven, they're working off commission, they're incentivized to buy for that client ASAP. They're in an agency where they're competing against other advocates. They're incentivized to try and, meet certain quotas, etc. So yes, some are worth it, some are not. Some are more experienced, some are not. Depends on what your value of worth is as well. Owen, is your value saving time? Is it having that third party support? Is it paying the right price? What's your definition of worth?
Have you done any podcasts in the past or posts or emails? Maybe this is something for next time we catch up, but I'd be really interested in like the kind of general checklist or the general kind of gist that you would go through to do your due diligence on a buyer's agent. You know what I mean? Because that would be really helpful for a lot of people that listen to the show. It's like, what should I be looking for when I partner with a buyer's agent?
Yeah, we will do an episode on that.
Cool. Building and pest inspection for an old apartment block. Worth it? This is on the Oz Property subreddit. I'll shorten the question. But it says, if you bought into an old apartment block, what did you get? Did you get a B and P done? And if
building and pest.
And if so, would you do it again?
Yeah. Okay. So the short answer to that is yes. You get a building inspection done on any property that you buy, regardless if it's an apartment, brand new, 100 years old, unless you're going to knock it over or whatever. Always get a building inspection. With apartments, though, you don't need to do the pest inspection.
Okay. Yeah, you don't.
Unless maybe it's a ground floor apartment with a big courtyard and there's a lot of timber and for some reason you do feel like you need to.
Yeah.
But for that reason, it generally means it's cheaper to do it as well. If it's just an apartment, they're not going to be able to comment on the common property or the roof or anything like that. But what I find is identified most commonly with apartments is water issues. So, for example, a shower which is holding water, like the grouts or the sealant's failed.
I've seen that so many times.
I've had one where the water is actually seeping through to the wall behind.
Yep.
And that buyer wouldn't have known because the wall behind was like in a robe. So you had to open the robe to see it. Or maybe there's just a hidden leak somewhere. Those are the most common things with apartments. And unless you know about it, you might buy that property and it just gets worse and worse over time.
And so where do you find, for people that are looking at this for the first time, where do you get a building and pest? Like who does that? Like how do you find someone to do that for you?
Oh, that's a great question. It's the same problem that you find with any professional you're trying to engage in the property industry. How do you find a good one?
Yeah.
Referrals, recommendations. I understand there could be some hesitation asking the agent. I know some agents who only refer building inspectors because they're more lenient.
Yeah.
And other times they refer them because they're genuinely good. Friends who have used them had good reviews, maybe great Google reviews. There's a lot of ways you can do that. I mean, I've got my trusted people I've used over the years. I'd also previously used inspectors where this is a very long time ago where I didn't have a great outcome and I just stopped using them straight away. Like no second chances. And there is, there's someone on TikTok who I'm not going to name. It's a very famous building inspector. And I know that there is himself is not ethical. There's a backstory there. So that's really hard because you look on social media or you might look on reviews and then think you can trust someone and in reality it's just because they're really great at marketing.
Yeah.
I think if you've had friends or family use someone, that's probably the first port of call.
Okay, cool. This one's a good one, and you're uniquely placed to probably answer this. Is it just me, or does anyone else get pissed off with certain real estate agents? Some incompetent idiots out there This is for the Queenslanders because this is where this one comes from.
Yeah.
They go on to say, buying process sucks. It makes me never want to go through this once again, once I buy a place. And then another comment is, most likely you would be in the minority if you didn't get pissed off with most real estate agents you dealt with. And this is like, it's harsh, but just curious on your thoughts. Now, I believe that you qualified or licensed as a real estate agent, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah. I'm technically a real estate agent, Owen.
Okay, no offense meant from these people.
I picked out, I picked out threads within this subreddit that I thought were educational and some I thought were a bit funny, like this one, for example. But it's so uncommon to come across someone who have said, I've had an amazing experience with every single real estate agent I've dealt with. There is so many reasons why it's frustrating to deal with agents. The majority of agents I work with are great. They're regular people. They're just trying their hardest. They're not out to get you. But there's plenty out there. And again, this is a commission-based industry. People are incentivized to make a sale. And in which case, sometimes they do unethical things, or they're not good communicators, or they're rude, or for whatever reason, they frustrate a buyer. And because there's an information asymmetry here, there's an imbalance of power. The agent, they should be more experienced. They've got that access to the vendor, whereas you maybe as a first home buyer, you don't know what you're doing. Yeah, it's really hard because, again, maybe they're doing the right thing and you're asking the wrong questions and therefore you're feeling frustrated or burnt, but you just haven't asked the right questions.
Yeah.
So, I think that education and understanding what questions to ask, what due diligence you need to do, and knowing that you can't trust agents, Owen, and I'm going to say that as a blanket statement. The reason why you can't trust them is not because you need to assume they're always out to get you or they're doing something wrong, but it's because they're not buying the property. You're buying the property. You can trust them and rely on them about like the process. Hey, how are you going to handle offers here? Like, the process elements, but the tangible elements, the due diligence elements, you can't rely on what they say. Do your own research.
Yep. Okay. Fair enough. Like it. Okay. Here, this is interesting. A real estate agent is requesting a holding deposit to go with an offer. Although it's not even on a contract at this stage, they're going to ask all interested buyers to do this. I've been hunting for properties for 3 months now, and this is the first time I've experienced this. And quite frankly, it's annoying. Is that normal?
It's not the norm, but it's not a red flag.
So holding deposit to go with an offer.
Yep. So I would say in the areas that I work in, I would have someone, I had one last week actually, but I haven't had one for 2 years before that.
Interesting.
So it's uncommon. There are certain agencies that have that as a policy. And that's to weed out time wasters.
I was going to say, to try and cut down the list straight away.
Yep. These deposits are going into the agent's trust account. Let's just assume that's actually where there is nothing seriously dodgy happening right here, which I haven't seen before. I've not come across that. I'm sure it's happened before, but goes into trust account. It's fully refundable. I mean, it's annoying in that it takes you a minute to make the transfer and you got to get it back later, but it's not a red flag.
Okay. How much is it normally? Is it like just like a $500, $1,000?
It could be $1,000. I had the one last week because it was a $1.6 million property. It was $5,000.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And we just sent them a screenshot of transfer. We got the property in the end, but if we hadn't, they would just refund it.
Okay. Underquote question. Actually, that reminds me just on that. I have there has been a lot of money transferred for commercial property for us here at Rask. Need to get that money back. It's been there for too long. I'm getting nervous. Underquote question. This is a great one. I went to 36 Cootamundra. This is an auction in a suburb here in Melbourne the last Saturday, and they said who the agent was, which I won't reveal. Price range was 1.58 to 1.68 million, but still passed in after a bid at 1.9 mil. Now they update the price to 1.95 to 2.05. Are they underquoting? They are wasting my time by giving me a misleading price. So just to confirm the prices, because podcasts aren't great with numbers, 1.58 to 1.68 was the original. Now they're saying 1.95 to 2.05 after it was passed in with an offer over 1.9 mil.
I think it's not unfair to say that this is blatant underquoting. Mm-hmm. There could be a situation here where the agent has done the right thing. In other words, maybe all of the comparable sales were lower and maybe originally the vendor's expectations were lower. Mm-hmm. And then maybe on auction day, the vendor decided they want an extra $400,000-500,000 because that's just their prerogative. They're allowed to do that. Mm-hmm. Maybe that happened. Mm. But in many situations, unfortunately, underquoting happens maliciously. The agent has purposefully quoted it at less than comparable sales, or the agent knows what the vendor wants and just underquotes it anyway, or the agent never asks the vendor what they want purposefully, and that's their justification to underquote. And there are certain suburbs in Melbourne where it is rife, and then because because everyone's doing it, it forces everyone else to do it, but it's not a justification for it, Owen. It's not. I'm not saying that's fine. I'm actually saying that's terrible, but everyone does it in that area.
Yeah.
And it's more common in certain locations than others. It's more common with certain agencies than others.
Isn't it a requirement? I know we're recording here in Victoria, but this podcast is national. Isn't it a requirement that you have the price ranges in Melbourne and Victoria now?
Yes. So in Melbourne, you've got the statement of information, which must include an estimated selling price, either a range of 10% or a single price. And that range must reflect, that price must be a reflection of something that is not less than the estimated selling price. It's subjective, Owen.
Yeah.
That's open to manipulation.
Estimated selling price, yeah.
The vendor's reserve, which if they've told you they were not going to sell for less than 2 and you quote less than 2, that's underquoting. Still happens. Or any price that a vendor's previously rejected. If you quote less than either of those three things, you're underquoting. The hard thing is the enforceability of it. You know, Consumer Affairs only has so much power and reach and capacity to investigate all of this. And even if they get in trouble later on for that, that's not helping you as a buyer in that time frame. It's very frustrating. So this is where you're relying on your own research. You do all the comparable sales and you might say, oh, well, this property's worth 2. They're quoting up to 1.6. If it's worth 2, like you're already going into that with eyes wide open. And then I do often ask the agent, is the vendor's expectations within the range? I'm going to spend money on a building inspection. Sometimes based on their response, I'll get an inclination. Straight away, they might say, yeah, really reasonable vendor, got to sell. Or they might skirt around the answer.
Okay.
And in which case, you've got to make your own judgment call.
Here's from the other side of the table, back to Reddit. Received an offer. I feel the property is worth slightly more after comparing it to recent sales for similar in the area.
So this is a vendor.
Yeah, this is a vendor.
Someone selling.
They go on to say, I also feel like the real estate agent may have a more vested interest in the buyer as he seems to be a known contact to them. Is it possible that the real estate agent is trying to get me to accept a lower price point? Should I tell my real estate agent I'd like to make a counteroffer new to selling?
Okay, we can tackle this in a lot of ways. First of all, during the process of interviewing agents, ideally you do not only go with one that ticks the boxes, but one that you can trust. As much as you can. There needs to be an element of trust during this process that they're representing your interests. But you also, with any kind of professional, you need to protect yourself too.
Yeah.
If this person seems to have this connection with the buyer, and unfortunately, I have seen situations in the past where a selling agent is particularly going out of their way to push a certain buyer's offer because that buyer has something to sell and that agent's trying to get that sale property.
Trying to get both.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you absolutely can tell them to counteroffer. You can tell them whatever you want them to do. You are the client.
Yeah, well, I'm paying them. Yeah.
Yeah. But all of this is really hard for a stranger on Reddit to answer to this person because there's so many more questions I would ask if someone came to me with this. How long's the property been on the market for? What are the best comparable sales? How many offers have you had? How many seconds inspections have you had? All of those answers would then help me determine whether that agent is actually trying to do the right thing and just get an offer, or if that vendor is maybe being unreasonable. If you've had a property on the market for 4 weeks, this is the only offer that you've had, you haven't had repeat inspections, that's a signal to you that maybe this is the best buyer, but you can always counter offer. But then you've got to say to the agent, okay, well, like what are the risks of counter offering? If I counter offer, at what price should we counter offer at? Like you got to work with them. But you're the client at the end of the day. You got to feel comfortable. If they're already feeling like their interests are not best represented, there's maybe a reason behind that.
Yeah, find out what it is and just it's your property.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. Reservoir or Glenroy. So this is here for Victorians. Investment property, then they got in brackets, capital growth. They go on to say house with 400 square meters, with tenant availability, a good buy under 850K, focusing on capital growth within 5 to 10 years. So 400 square meters, 850K, good buy, take to social media. Guys, tell me if I should do this.
I'm going to answer this in a very generic response rather than saying go to Glenroy or go to Reservoir, because I'm not going to give suburb advice over the podcast. Sorry, Owen. I'm sure I could get a lot of views.
I'm fresh out of borrowing power, you know.
There are so many TikToks which have like, you know, an expert saying, oh, I would go to this suburb, invest in this suburb. They get so many likes.
Oh, yeah, they would.
They get so many likes. I would say, okay, first of all, you know, writing down your investment brief. What are you wanting to get out of this? Going through the sold section is what I'm wanting achievable in these suburbs. For example, you might be able to get that in Glenroy and it's much closer to the shops. You might be able to get it in Reservoir, but it's in the edge of Reservoir, not near amenity. And then you've got to decide which is better. But doing your own more specific suburb research to say, okay, well, what is the amenity in this area? Why are people moving into this location? What are the demographics? Why do people who are going to have higher incomes in the future, because it's higher incomes that drive capital growth.
Yeah.
Right? Why are they wanting to or going to want to move into this area in the future? And you've got to do that kind of research. And then you don't necessarily have to just have one suburb you're focusing on. With a lot of investors we will have multiple suburbs that we include because they all have similar price points and demographics and opportunity. But then by having multiple suburbs, it allows us to be a bit more fussy, and particularly with the property itself.
Yep.
So, you know, there's no black or white answer here.
I think this requires like a proper strategy.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's parts of Reservoir which you probably wouldn't buy in. There's parts of Glenroy you probably wouldn't buy in. So then you not only a suburb selection, but street selection as well, and type of property.
Yeah, unless you're buying the whole suburb. Unless, good on you.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one, we've got 2 more questions. This one here is a bit of a technical one, but it's a good one. Positive admin fund, but negative maintenance fund. So this is an interesting question for people that are looking at any type of body corp stratus type stuff. Looking at what we call a Section 32 here in Victoria, which is just like a property statement. What would you call it for people that are not from Victoria? Section 32.
It's a disclosure statement. So it's got various documents in there. You must have a minimum amount of documents in there. And then there's bonus documents that you can have, and it just tells you what you're buying. You don't have that in other states. A lot of other states, like up to the buyer to find these things out. Yeah, Section 32 for people that buy in Victoria is incredibly detailed. I actually love it. So looking at this document for a property, and the body corp documents list the admin fund as being positive over 300K, but the maintenance fund is negative. Total funds held is still well over $200,000. The minutes mention a number of major works that were rectified last year. Should this be something I need to be concerned about? So just to recap the numbers, they said there's a positive admin fund over 300K, but a maintenance fund that is negative. Yep. What does that mean? What should we be paying attention to? Okay, so this is an example, first of all, where you've got a snapshot in time looking at a situation. Like I could be looking at your budget right now, Owen, and be like, oh, that's no good. But you're like, well, there's a reason behind that. Whenever we're doing our due diligence, we want to have context. Okay. So we are always, when we're looking at an owner's corporation certificate in minutes, we're identifying concerns or questions we've got, and then we're looking into it. We're calling the OC. We're saying, hey, why is it like this? And they might say, oh, well, because we had a lot of unforeseen maintenance, or because we've just taken over this and previously it was mismanaged and we're getting back on track. We were being really proactive with maintenance, and we've spent a lot of money, but we've got a plan to recoup that through all of this. Or it could just be like, you could tell by speaking to them, it's been completely mismanaged. There was no planning in place. They had all of these costs they'd never accounted for. So you need to get a broader picture to then say, okay, well, am I comfortable with the answers here? Yeah, so it's the context that's really important. It's the context that's important. Yeah. So, and if you can't call them, because I know I don't know. I think in New South Wales, it's not the norm to call the strata companies. You have it like you can do a strata search. There's a few more roadblocks there, but if they won't speak to us, we write a big email with our questions and we send it to the agent. We say, forward this to the OC manager, tell the vendor to give them permission to answer, and I need everything back in writing.
Fair enough. Yeah, you're going to buy it.
Yep. So if you've got any concern after reading, you can request previous minutes as well from the last few years or so.
Would you be like looking at, so just in a general like visual inspection, would you be looking for like wear and tear on common areas, things that may be out of place? Is that a thing or not really?
You can, but it's more
things you can't see.
Well, how are you going to then be the judge of what's okay and what's not? So with bigger blocks, ideally there is, and with where there's a lot of common property, etc., ideally there is a bit more buffer in the maintenance fund, for example, for works that are coming up. But I've got a property, it's an apartment in a block of 8 from built in the 70s. And as an OC committee, we've decided, because everyone else likes it to be like this, that we're going to be reactive rather than proactive.
Yeah.
And instead of saving up for works in the future, when we need to do the works, we just all contribute as a special levy.
Gotcha.
That's not a red flag to me. In fact, it means when I sell that property, I then haven't prepaid for the future person's maintenance, but then the future person might look at that and say, well, there's nothing in the maintenance fund. You know, I'd prefer more to be in there. So you got to have that context.
Yeah, you got to be aware. Yeah, okay. All right, so this is a final question. And I'm actually going to read someone's response to this, which got upvoted. So that then you can, and then give you a chance to answer. So they say, I can't win at auctions and pre-auction costs for multiple properties, legal, strata, and building and pest reports. It's expensive. Any advice, please? Now, the first person to respond to this said, go to auctions you can actually compete in. And that got 38 votes.
That's like saying, just have the most money.
Yeah, just don't live there. Is another one. Buy somewhere cheaper. So this is for the New South Walians. They go on to say, I've been to a few auctions recently. I'm wondering how I will ever win. Someone will always have more money than me. Not a lot of parties at the auctions, not a lot of bidders really, around 5 parties actually placing bids.
That's a lot still.
Yeah, I feel like that's a lot.
That's 5, yeah.
However, there are always 2 keen and rich bidders in the end who go head to head. I am in Sydney looking for an apartment in the eastern suburbs. Any advice, please?
Okay. It depends on a lot of things. So if this person is constantly going to auction and they're missing out, just say they're the underbidder. Doesn't sound like they are, but just say they're just missing out or everything's going really close within reach. That's probably a bit of bad luck.
Yeah, okay.
And I would say maybe you don't need to necessarily reassess strategy. However, if you're constantly going to auctions and these properties are selling for significantly more than your budget and there's multiple people always above you, that could suggest you need to realign your strategy. Say, well, what you want, you can't afford at the moment. What are you going to change? Either you get more money, you change locations, you change the size of the apartment and the condition of the apartment. So that's just figuring out, like, is the problem you?
Yeah.
Or is it a bit of bad luck? And yeah, it's expensive. You need to know that before you buy a property, you've got to budget a little bit of a buffer for these costs, knowing that you might have to go for several properties before you're successful. So you've got to allocate a couple of grand or so for these sunk purchase costs that you're not going to get back if you don't get the property.
They did go on to say that they're going to have to pay, $200 to $300 at least for the solicitor to review the contract every time, $300 strata report. And, they say that they could potentially, prepay with some of the inspections and, costs and that sort of stuff. It's a lot. It is a lot of money if you don't think you're going to win.
Sometimes we will have clients where, especially in hot markets, rising markets, we are unsuccessful and we're close, but we're unsuccessful a couple of times. And then I say to them, okay, we can keep going down this path where we're aiming for the amazing property and one that's going to tick all your boxes, knowing that we've got maybe a 50-50 chance at each auction. It's going to keep costing you time, money, and energy, emotions. Or we can pursue properties that you can definitely afford, and then we've got some competitive buffer if there is competition, but you're not going to like them as much. Which path do we go down now? And then they might choose one of those paths, and they keep on going down the try your luck path. We could go down the other path later on.
Yeah.
You got to make a decision at that point in time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because it is disheartening to go through all that. And then to also have to fork out the cost continuously. And this is
why underquoting is a problem too, because that gets people's expectations up, especially first home buyers who don't know that it's happening. They focus on the quote range. They are definitely going to be, unfortunately, spending a lot of money. And then please don't also get to the point where you say, well, I'm not going to do due diligence anymore. I'm not going to pay for a building inspection or a contract review.
Yeah, There's actually in some of the questions that I've asked you, there's a bunch of like comments and responses to those that are like people that are kind of like really put off and disheartened by certain things, particularly a lot of first home buyers and particularly around New South Wales and even inner city Brisbane and so on. It's a thing, right? And so we spoke about this previously in another episode about just making sure you're not just settling out of desperation and these types of things.
Yeah. And is the problem you? Is it the market? Is it bad luck? Is it because your expectations are not right? Like, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Not just being a passenger with all of this and then just ended up giving up, settling or just not buying anything.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, this has been heaps of fun. We do have like a shed load of questions that we should answer from people that listen to the show. So send in your questions. Amy and I would love to jump back in the studio and answer your questions. No matter where you are, no matter what you want to talk about, we want to hear from you. We also appreciate your feedback and your comments as well. You can follow the link in your podcast player. It says Ask a Question, select the Australian Property Podcast. You can jump into the community and you can head to amylunardi.com.au. I'll put a link in the podcast player for that as well as YouTube. And you can get in contact with Amy. Deal with a lot of clients here in Melbourne. And I've got a good feeling. I know you said the whole suburb thing before, but I've got a good feeling about Melbourne over the next few years. I just, as my mother-in-law would say, I just feel it in my waters. I just feel
it's funny. I've got so many investors calling me at the moment. They're like, I think Melbourne's going to do something. And I said, it's done something. It started doing something in February this year. And if you wanted to buy at the bottom, you missed that, but it's not too late to get on the boat.
Okay.
There's this misconception. A lot of people, I missed the boat. You get on the boat if it's a good boat.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And it's, some great pockets, particularly where you serve, like that inner ring of Melbourne is like really special. So cool. Well, Amy Lunardi, this has been heaps of fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to source all these things on Reddit. Maybe we can do some TikTok answers soon too.
Oh,
that'll be a bit dicey. That'd be fun. But once again, really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Owen. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you want to hear more from us, you can get daily videos and podcasts on RAS YouTube channel. Or if you want to enroll in a free course on investing, property, business, money, you name it, you can join over 34,000 other students and enroll in a free course on the Rask website. Simply head to www.rask.com.au and follow the prompts. Thanks for watching this Rask podcast.